Hello everybody, Matt with Panoply here, and today I'm going to show you how to get up and running with your Panoply data warehouse. Now, I've already created an account here, so we can begin by adding a data source, and then once we've done that, I'll talk a little bit about viewing that data after it's been imported, and then show you how to connect Panoply to some downstream tool like a visualization tool, a BI tool. So I'm already logged in. You can see I've actually already connected some of my own data sources here in the sandbox environment. But to add your first data source, you can actually just click this green shiny button in the top right and view the available sources. Now, we've broken the sources down into three categories, the most prominent of these being the APIs. So you can see here we've got marketing data like HubSpot, Marketo, as well as ad data, so Google AdWords, Facebook ads, Bing ads, all that good stuff, as well as sales data like Salesforce and other slightly more general purpose types of data sources like Google Sheets that can contain flat data. For this, of course, I'm going to actually be pulling in some Google Analytics data. Now, the second category here is the databases. So this is your typical relational data stores like SQL Server, Postgres, MySQL, as well as more newfangled NoSQL databases like MongoDB and Cassandra. The last category here is the most wide-ranging and far-flung. This really is the category of file systems and services. So this could be anything from a Excel spreadsheet here you could directly upload from your laptop. Could be a flat file like a CSV file or a new line delimited JSON that's stored in an Amazon S3 bucket. We also have support here for a few different types of queuing systems, Amazon SQS and RabbitMQ. And kind of the last item here in this services category is the SDK. So we have three different open source SDKs, Python, Ruby, and Node.js. You can use those to actually build your own custom connector, or you can just drop a line of code into a script or an app that you have to push JSON messages to Panoply near real time. But for today, we're just going to be connecting this Google Analytics API. So to do that, you can actually just hit this icon here, and then we're going to authenticate. That is to give the Panoply app permission to pull data from our Google Analytics environment. So we'll go ahead and say yes here and allow. And now we've given the Panoply app permission. So after we've done that, we'll select a view. And now if you have multiple Google Analytics properties, you'll be able to choose that here as well. Once we've done that, we get a default list of metrics and dimensions to choose from, so we can mix and match these and then validate them against our built-in checker so that we know the request we're sending to Google Analytics is valid. And really, that's all we have to do to now collect this data. But before we do that, we probably want to actually look at a couple other options. The first of those being the date range. So by default, we're just going to be loading 30 days of data, but you may want to load more than that. Maybe you want to do a year load, or you want to pull all data from the beginning of time. For this demo, we'll just actually leave the default. And there are a couple other advanced options that we may want to explore. The first of those being the destination. So all these APIs have a default destination table that we think makes a lot of sense, and you can certainly leave as is. But you can also create your own name, and you can also use a variable expression to, on the fly, determine where data ends up. Now, the primary key setting here is what governs our upstart mechanism. So whether or not we're going to be appending a row to a table or updating an existing row is defined by whether or not that primary key already exists. The exclusion parameter here does exactly what you'd think. It excludes certain data from getting pulled into Panoply in the first place. So this could be a single column or an entire set of columns. The parse string option here, really special purpose, but this comes in handy if you've got a CSV file that includes some JSON data buried within it. This gives our import parser a hint to actually explode that JSON data so that it's easier to query at runtime. The Truncate Table option here actually wipes the slate clean. That is, it deletes or drops all rows from existing tables tied to this data source. This is great if you're doing some quick experimentation, some quick iteration, and you want to wipe the slate clean and start fresh. So for now, we'll leave all those as is, and we'll just hit collect, and this will start pulling that Google Analytics data into our Panoply data warehouse. So notice here that this source is booting, and it will begin collecting data momentarily. Now, by default, this is going to be a one-time load, but in production, once you've got the data loading, you're probably going to want to actually set a schedule. So if we click this clock icon, we'll see here that we can select some day or every day, and then we can select an hourly regimen. So I may want to actually load this up on an hourly basis. So I just hit accept here, and now it's going to run every hour on the hour going forward. And we can see now that our data source is actually running and collecting data. So we can see, if we go to this tables menu, that we've got a couple tables here, and we can filter down, actually drill into this Google Analytics table. So we see 42,000 rows have already been collected. And now in this tables menu, we see a lot more info on the table itself. So the top part here gives us a sample of the data, so we can very quickly make sure that this data passes a sniff test. We can see there's some geographic info, some page view info, some timestamps, so indeed this looks reasonable. Now here in the bottom left, we have the metadata panel. This gives us more information about the columns themselves. So if we want, we can actually rename any given column, we can add a human readable description, we can override the default inferred type. So this is actually inferred on the back end by Panoply based on statistical samples of the underlying data. Generally speaking, this is going to be totally fine. You're not going to need to change any of these defaults, but depending on your data sets, you can customize the columns as needed here. You can also delete columns or change how we parse nested values. So are we going to be flattening all of these nested structures onto a single parent table, or are we going to be generating lots of subtables, children that we can actually join back up to create views? So this is a stylistic choice, data modeling choice, but if we need to make these changes here, we certainly can. And these options exist for every single one of the columns in the table. Now, perhaps the most important info on this page is actually this connection info here on the bottom right. So this is what you're going to use to connect Panoply to a BI tool, to a SQL Workbench, or any other outside tool. And you can actually bring that connect info up at any time by hitting that connect tab on the left. So we see here our host name. This will be the same across the board. Your database name will be different. It'll be whatever you chose when you created your account. And then, of course, your username and password will be what you selected as well. And you can use any ODBC or JDBC driver that operates over Postgres and Redshift to connect to Panoply. So it's very standard. It's a pretty open platform. And really, like I said, most of our users are going to be querying from another type of workbench or visualization tool. But before that, we can actually query Panoply directly here in the platform. So we hit this query button. This will bring us to the Analyze tab, and we can run a SQL query from here. So this is just a select limit 10, but we may want to look at something a little bit more interesting like browser traffic over a given time frame or visitor traffic. So we can actually open up any previously saved queries like this Google Analytics production website traffic by browser and rerun. Now this, as we've saved it, as actually a view, this will be promoted as a candidate for materialization based on our access patterns. So if you're running this query more frequently, this is going to be more likely to be materialized, and we're going to be automatically updating this view anytime new data is imported into Panoply that's referenced by this view. Similarly, we're going to be caching queries. So if the second time you run a query is going to be much faster than you run the first time. We're going to be organizing your queries based on whether they're ad hoc or batch process. So if they're run very infrequently at night, these are going to be given a lower prioritization than those ad hoc queries that you're running during the day. With that, there are a few other things I want to point out here in the Analyze tab. So any query that you have here, you can actually dump the results to a CSV file just by hitting that export button. You'll see that's preparing the download for me now. And the last thing here is the ability to set alerts. So you can actually define an alert based on any criterion. So the result value compared to any other given value. This is really nice if you want to just say check your revenue on a given day. You can get an automated notification here in the alerts panel, and then you can view those at any time. Now we're not trying to reinvent the metrics alerting wheel. You can plug in, again, any tool that can talk over JDBC or ODBC to Panoply to define more complex alerts or rules. So now you've seen how to get up and running with your Panoply data warehouse, and so you can visit our homepage and actually spin up your own free trial now, and you should be up and running with your account in a matter of minutes.